Good afternoon, everyone. I'm still waiting for Ashraf to join. He had a class before this webinar, so we're going to give him a few minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. I, Ashraf, I see you just came in. I'm going to make you a co-host, okay? So that when the time comes, that you can do what you need to do. But welcome, everybody. My name is Nika Hector, and welcome to September's webinar. The topic will be Stand Out, preparing for the Acquia Drupal 11 Backend Certification Program. So before I hand over the reins to Ashraf, I would like to talk a little bit about Drupal for Gov and what we do. For those of you who aren't familiar, we are a community of open source advocates interested in government and making it open source, which includes Drupal, of course. In addition to this webinar that we hold every third Thursday at 3 p.m., our most popular event is Drupal GovCon, which was this past August. We hope to share more information about next year. We're working on the venue and logistics now, so that information is coming soon. In addition, on occasion, we do half training days. We participate in the Gov Summit at DrupalCon North America. So if you're interested in participating or doing a particular webinar, please reach out to us on LinkedIn. And we also have a Slack channel. So in addition to this event, I always like to share all of the wonderful community events that happen throughout the states. Bad Camp is happening in Oakland, and I see a number of two events happening in October in Texas and Oregon. So if you are in those areas or plan to be, check them out. Also, we're always looking for places to hold half-day trainings. So if you work within an organization or an agency that has the space, please contact us at info@drupalforgov.us. Also, if you miss a webinar, we always upload if we aren't live streaming, which we are actively live streaming now. But you can check out past webinars at youtube.com/drupalforgovnp because there are actually two YouTube channels for, so make sure you have the right one. And last but definitely not least, I'd like to introduce Ashraf. He is the founder of Debug Academy. He teaches hands-on Drupal training, courses tailored to the particular audience. His courses include intermediate and advanced level Acquia Certification Prep. So, Ashraf, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Okay. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I'm gonna take it easy on the volume. Let me know if I'm too quiet, but I just was teaching class after coming off of a cold and lost my voice in the middle of class. It seems to be back right now, so it's not the type of technical difficulty that you usually expect when doing something online, but we'll find out. Um, I do have backup support here. Amani, thank you for joining. So if my voice gives out, she will help me out. Um, okay, so what we're talking about today is the Backend Specialist exam that Acquia administers, or I should say provides, and um, and essentially how to prepare for it, how to pass it. Um, and why am I the person talking about this? Well, it's all the fancy badges in the bottom left over there. Um, my name is Ashraf. I've been running Debug Academy for more than 10 years. I worked as I worked at Acquia as a technical architect. I was there when the certification exams were first released. I was part of the first batch of people um, put into a big cafeteria where we all took those exams. And it was very um, interesting, even at the time, because um, some of the best Drupal developers did not pass the exam. Um, and the exams were quite challenging, but it was, you know, people who were more experienced than I was, who I would ask for help and whatnot, didn't pass, and I did. And other, of course, many people did pass. But I did end up digging in. You know, I took all the Drupal 7, 8, 9, 10, and started on the 11 ones as well. The Drupal exams for front end, back end, and developer. And we've made courses to teach you all how to get through those as well. Um, Now, in general, we do have various courses. We've got a Become a Drupal Developer per course. This one has begun to move slightly upstream in terms of the material covered. And what I mean by upstream is a little more advanced. Um, we historically have taught HTML and CSS in addition to theming and module development. Um, the semester that's in progress is the first one where we are phasing out most of the HTML and CSS and replacing that with more module development and more advanced theming. So um, even if you're a Drupal developer, even if you've done some theming, um,
Did okay.
it dropped out. This happened a few times when you were presenting as well. So I
Uh,
think there's an issue on Zoom, um, but hopefully it won't happen too much. But yeah, basically, we've got our part-time 3-month course if you're looking to get comfortable with development, and we've got various certification prep courses. The back-end one starts October 1st. You're going to see some of that today, and the front-end one starts November 4th. Um, and we've got other courses as well, and custom training, etc. Um, the last marketing thing I'll throw in there is Drupito is a product we've been working on. It's something to make building sites for lower budget clients, including yourself, if you want to build a personal site and you don't feel like investing too much time because your time is valuable. Um, the idea is you build it on Drupito, you can host it for as little as $10 a month, and we take care of all the maintenance and upgrades for you. So you get to focus on pretty much the site building and the content editing, and you get the power of Drupal without the maintenance. Okay, so I'll, I want to get to the good part. So you'll see me skip a few slides here and there. This was originally designed for a longer format, but we're doing a condensed version today. Now, for these exams in general, the exams are scheduled for 2 hours. The Acquia Backend Certification Exam is scheduled for 2 hours. It consists of 60 multiple choice questions. You need to get at least 70% correct to pass, and the exam is administered online through ProctorU. Every single time I've taken it, and you saw how many times I took it, again, I've taken it Drupal 7 through 11. Um, there have always been technical difficulties, whichever laptop I've used. the exam has almost always started 30 to 60 minutes after it was scheduled to start. So factor that in when you schedule your exam. Factor in the fact that I might actually start answering questions 30 minutes, an hour after the exam starts. In terms of the course that we teach to prepare for this, um, it's divided into 4 classes: Fundamental Web Concepts, Drupal Core API, Debugging and Theming, and Performance, Security, and Community. We're covering material from the 4th one. I didn't want to start with the first one today because I felt most people will get the most value from the 4th one. So I didn't want to gatekeep that behind the paid course. So we're going through what we can of that today. And, the full course starts October 1st for anyone who's interested. In the full course, you get thorough written lesson material. The idea is you review the written lessons, you come to class. In class, we go over questions on that material that are similar to the questions you would get on the exam. And we will be doing some of that today in terms of the interactive learning and the quizzes. After the course, you get a practice exam. Generally speaking, if you do well on the practice exam, you will do well on the Acquia exam. Okay, now let's jump into the material. And I will look at the chat. If there's questions or thoughts, you're welcome to post in the chat. All right, so again, this is the material that comes up on the exam. So for performance, especially on this slide, we're focusing on front-end performance, CSS and JavaScript in particular. Some things to be aware of for these multiple choice questions. You should minify your JavaScript, CSS, and your HTML as much as possible. You shouldn't have much more HTML than necessary. You should aggregate your JavaScript and CSS through Drupal. So you should turn on aggregation for those. That makes it so that instead of having many different JavaScript and CSS files, it will bundle them up into a single JavaScript file and a single CSS file. Depending on your configuration, it may not literally be one, but that's the idea. Now, in your themes libraries.yaml file, you can also set this property of pre-process to false if you don't want that file aggregated. Okay, now just looking for the Zoom drawing tool. I don't see it for some reason, but that's okay. Okay, so again, we're focusing on things they ask about on the exam. If you have a CSS file or a JavaScript file and you don't want that one file to be included in the aggregation, you don't have to turn off aggregation for the whole site. You can set preprocess to false for that file within libraries.yaml. Now, in terms of improving the perceived performance or the page load time, you don't want to just throw images on a page without using image styles or setting the appropriate file size. You want your images optimized. You want to use lazy loading as much as possible so that loading those assets or files does not block loading the rest of the page. You don't want to load images that are not being used. Some of this sounds obvious, but if we talk about it, it's because it's asked about. And you want to use syslog instead of dblog. dblog writes logs to the database, which can cause the site to become a bit slower. Okay, so here's a practice question. Notice the QR code. Feel free to use your phone to scan the code and answer the question. Okay, so this says you have a field widget with over 1,000 taxonomy terms referenced. It's causing the node edit form to load slowly. How can you fix this widget so that the form loads faster? Okay, so scan this QR code and choose an answer, and I'll give you I don't know, 30 seconds to do that. Um, in the class, this is what we do. We don't do it through a QR code in class. We do it through private chat. But this is for a one-time, you know, short class. I prefer to do it this way so that we don't have to do the whole training on how to send private messages and that type of thing. Okay, so I'll just give you another 10 seconds and then we'll see what the answers are. And again, you see the question here. It's going to be similar to the questions you would get on the actual certification exams. Okay, so let's see the results. Okay, so this is why I like to teach this course. The results are split three ways. Nobody thinks that C is the right answer, but a number of people think D is, and the rest are split between A and B. So let's talk about what the right answer is and why. You have a field widget with over 1,000 terms referenced. Okay, so a field widget. So this is a field on your form. It's causing the whole node edit form to load slowly. How do you fix it so it loads faster? Okay, so choice A, use views entity reference. Now, that's not going to be correct because what views entity reference can be useful for is filtering the options in the widget, but the question did not say that we don't want all of those options available, right? So you can't add instructions, you can't add advice for the client. Even in the real world, if you think I would tell the client, don't have 1,000, that's not the idea here. You're not allowed to correct the client. So it's not A because that's not going to help. We're not allowed to lower the number of items. Use a lazy builder. A lazy builder allows the page to load first, and then whatever is loaded through the lazy builder can load second. That would solve the problem. And so that is the right choice, right? Because with the lazy builder, you're not going to block the rest of the page load. Create a custom field widget with proper cache tags would not solve it. Cache tags are for clearing the cache proactively when something changes. All right, next question. You have drop-down fields, parent and child, on your node edit form. The values in the child dropdown are dynamically populated based on the values from the parent dropdown. How should this be implemented in a performant way? Okay, go ahead and scan this QR code and answer the question there. Okay, and I'll give you about a minute to do that. Look at the watch. About 30 seconds left. So I'll take a look at what people's responses are for this one. Once again, there is no leader. Well, there's a tie between use form states API and use Ajax. Use post render callback is a close third, and then JavaScript behaviors. So let's talk about it. You have drop-down fields, parent and child. So imagine country and then state. right? Or I guess parent and child. Um, so if someone picks a value in parent, then the values in child change. Um, Let me go back to country and state because I think parent and child are more generic. So, or state and cities, right? So if you have a drop down of states and you choose a state, and then you have a drop down of cities, you only want to see cities from that state, from the selected state in the cities drop down. So let's see which of these could do that. Form States API. It's really tempting to pick that because um, form states allows you to it lets the form react to user input, right? So a user can pick an option, and then because they picked an option, another field can become visible. But it's not going to pass the value that they picked. It's not going to tell you which state they selected, so you can figure out what city to display. So that is not the correct answer. Use Ajax that can do it, right? Ajax allows you to react to an action on the page and then dynamically load something and even update a form. So Ajax would do it. What about post-render callback? Post-render, generally speaking, makes things slower. Post-render is something that reacts after the render array has already turned into HTML. So if you needed to like search the raw HTML and do some search and replace or something like that, you could use post-render callback to do that. So generally speaking, on a performance question, that's not going to be the right answer. And then use JavaScript behaviors. You should always use JavaScript behaviors when you're just writing custom JavaScript. And you could do this if you were to recreate some, functionality in a more complicated way. But Ajax is the render array way of doing it. It's the way that's closer to how Form API is meant to work. It may not feel like it, but I am speed running through some of this to try to keep this webinar, about an hour long. So in the course format, again, the idea is you review before class, you come to class, and that's when you see the questions for the first time. And we spend more time talking about these and demonstrating some of them. There are also maybe double the questions. I had to cut half of them from today's class to try to fit it in, um, more reasonable amount of time. Um, and yes, Damien, the HTMX is maybe that'll be the answer in a future version of the exam. But yeah, it's awesome to see Drupal core has adopted HTMX in 11.3. Okay, so um, other topics related to performance improvement that come up on the exam. Again, using lazy builders to render dynamic content so that they can load after the page has loaded, so they load in a non-blocking way. You can use Ajax to load content on demand so that you don't trigger a full page refresh. Um, Views caching. So on your views, there is a setting for whether to query or I should say to cache the query results. So you should have that enabled. Use syslog instead of dblog. Again, if something um, comes up on the exam and those are choices, that is the correct answer. And one thing you might wonder, how do I know if it's actually correct? I didn't get 100% on the exam, so I I won't be 100% confident that every question, I have the right answer for. With that said, I did get 100% on performance and on security and various other issues. And after I take the exam, I always review all of my notes and I see, okay, what could possibly have been wrong. I got 100% on performance and here, and I revise it. So um, this course was prepared like 2 years ago, and I haven't released it until now because I wanted to have a very high degree of confidence that it was ready and accurate. I wish I could take notes during the test. The test, actually, it's worth noting. You cannot take notes. You cannot talk to yourself. You can't move your mouth. You can't look around. It's very, very restrictive. Um, it's really just what you remember. So I've taken the exams from Drupal 7 through 11, so I could remember more each time, and all of our employees take it. At the end of the day, I don't try to, the purpose of the course is not to cheat or anything like that. We don't try to give you exactly the same questions. But what I do try to do is sort of figure out where the questions are coming from, and there are patterns to that. It comes from documentation on Drupal.org. It comes from other resources that where you can start to see, okay, the way it's written here is the way it was asked about. And some of the questions, I don't even agree with the answer necessarily. Um, yeah, I sometimes don't agree with the answers that are correct on the exam, but I know that they're the correct answer. And so I look into that and I see in the documentation how, okay, I suppose if you were to take that one paragraph from the documentation and not put any more context and make a multiple choice question from it, I understand how they came to that being the correct answer. So I don't always agree with what the correct answer is, but I understand where it came from, and sometimes it's from core, sometimes it's from documentation, etc. So we teach, the areas of the documentation that are important to learn, the areas of the release notes. That's also a really good place to study. So yes, you do not get to see your questions and answers at the end of the test. You don't get to see what you got wrong. And that's, really a big reason I made the course, is because it's difficult to correct yourself after taking the exam. Um, yeah, you said you often talk to yourself to activate your hearing in addition to your eyes. Yes. And the proctor, they they hate that mannerism. Yeah, me too. I do like to, repeat the question, read it out loud a few times, and I'm not allowed to do that on the test, which is unfortunate. I wish they had an in-person option so they could be a little more flexible in person, but they stopped doing that at some point. Okay, so there are questions about caching as well, and a quick overview of what is caching really. I think everybody who works with Drupal knows to clear the cache before you spend too much time debugging. But caching essentially refers to saving a built copy of anything, so that you don't have to rebuild it as often. One analogy that someone I worked for 15 years ago said that really was an eye-opening moment for me was, at the time when you would open Excel spreadsheets that had, I don't know, 10,000 rows, Excel would sort of freeze up. It would take 10 minutes to open. Um, so he basically said, opening an Excel spreadsheet is like just, opening an uncached page. But once you open it, you could take a picture of it with your phone or your computer or whatever it might be. Opening the picture didn't take long, right? You could look at that picture anytime immediately. So the picture of the opened Excel spreadsheet, that is the cached copy. So that's the idea. Cache is taking a picture of the built version of something so that next time you don't have to go open Excel again. You can just open the picture. So why is caching such a big thing in Drupal? Well, Drupal allows you to create a lot of different entity types, data types, relationships between those entity types, right? We have entity references, paragraphs, content types, taxonomy, all these things. Um, and we have display modes. So you can take all those different data types, mix and match them how you like, render them using various display modes. On Debug Academy's site, we have the courses displaying using, let's say, a card display. On the course listing page, we have an alternate card display. we have a full page display. So the same course content type, we have 4 displays for it. And, you know, it takes time to build those displays. Um, and so we might as well save it, right? Do that work once and save the cached copy. So in terms of caching at a high level, well, medium level, um, in Drupal, you work with cache tags. So cache tags are responsible for proactive invalidation of the cache. So that basically is like if we have that picture of the Excel spreadsheet, when someone goes into Excel and edits a row on the spreadsheet, that picture is out of date. So a cache tag would be essentially a label or a category for that Excel spreadsheet that says anytime someone edits this Excel spreadsheet, delete that image, right? We need to regenerate it. So that's what cache tags are responsible for. They proactively delete cache as soon as it needs to be updated. Cache context, on the other hand, allows you to create different versions of the cache based on maybe which user role is looking at it, which user is looking at it, which time zone it's being viewed from. So it allows you to create different pictures for different audiences, right? Different cache items for different audiences. And cache max age, that is a time-based expiration of the cache. So if you don't want to proactively clear it, you can add a time limit. So that might be good for something like I don't know, a copyright with a year. Maybe you have a 24-hour cache max age on that, so that once a day it checks, does this year need to be updated? Alternatively, you could do that with JavaScript, but that's not the point that I'm trying to make. Um, okay, so where do we set cache tags, context, and max age? We set them in our render arrays in the cache property. And you can add it to any render array. Here is an example of cache information that goes a little bit beyond what you might be used to. But I think this example includes a lot of useful information. And a similar example is in the Drupal documentation, I believe. So this is a render array, and it has a key of markup. So markup allows you to just write raw HTML. Um, it, it'll take whatever's to the right of the markup and pretty much render it as HTML. Um, but in this markup, it says hi, and there's a placeholder for the name. And it says welcome back, and it has a placeholder for the site name. So the name is replaced with this get username call from the current user object. The site is replaced with get name from this config object. And a few lines above that, you can see the config object is system.site, and you can see the user object is the current user. So this render array will display the current user's name and the current and the site name from system.site config. Now, that information is going to vary. It's going to be different depending on who's looking at it. If I'm looking at it, it would say my name. If a different user is looking at it, it should say their name. And so we can't just use the same cache for all of us. And that's where cache context comes into play. So we have that cache key. Underneath it, we have the context key. Okay, and within the context key, you can put an array of however many different contexts you like. Each context um, basically says this cache should be unique for the following context. So a context of user means this cache should be unique per user, or the image of this cache, right? This image of this spreadsheet should be unique depending on who is looking at it. So if I take the picture, I can look at it. If someone else looks at it, they have to get their own picture. They can't look at my picture. So that makes sense in this example where the content includes the viewer's name. Also worth noting that you want to avoid using a cache context of user as much as possible, because then if every different user needs their own copy of the cache, depending on the website and whatnot, you may be defeating the purpose of cache, right? You're rebuilding it per user. So it really depends on the details of what you're building. All right. Now, notice this is missing cache tags, right? So this is caching per user, but what if I logged in and I edited my user account and I changed my username? This would still show my old username. Or what if the site builder goes and changes the site name? This would still show the site name because we didn't put the right cache tag. Well, that's where these two lines come into play. This renderer variable is a Drupal service, the renderer service, and it has a few utility functions, useful functions, such as add cacheable dependency. So what this does is the first argument is your render array. The second argument is an object that I believe it implements cacheable interface. Um, that might not be the exact interface name. I would need to double check. But you have your render array as the first object, and sorry, as the first argument. And then the second argument is an object that is cacheable. Okay. And the reason you pass these two arguments is because the renderer will take the caching information from the config, such as the cache tags for that config, and it'll add them to your render array. And on the very next line, we see user load, the current user's ID, and our render array again. So then it also takes the user's cache tags and cache context and everything else, and it adds it to your render array. So it populates your render array. You don't need to remember the cache tags. This is something that, probably should be used a lot more than it is. Okay. All right. Um, The Big Pipe module, if you're not familiar, it's part of Drupal core as of Drupal 8.3. It uses that, similar the lazy builder approach. It essentially makes it so that the content on the page will display when it's ready. So instead of waiting for the entire page to finish loading, whichever regions are ready, whichever blocks are ready, will display, and the other ones will take the time they need to load, and then they'll display when they're ready. So that's a module, doesn't work on all hosting environments, but it's a module that you can enable, and it makes the perceived performance of the page much better, especially under certain circumstances. Let's say you have an advertisement that's really slow, or like a weather or a stock ticker block that is not cacheable, but everything else is cacheable. Um, BigPipe can make it so that the rest of your page still loads really quickly, and that stock block will load when it's ready. Okay. All right, so the next question. I'll give you about a minute to answer this one. Please scan that QR code and choose the three things that you should do to improve performance on your Drupal site. All right, let's do another 10 seconds. Three things you should do to improve performance on your Drupal site. The options are enable BigPipe, ensure caching is enabled for views, disable dblog and enable syslog, and make all images use the thumbnail image style. Okay, so this one, mostly people got it right. The only one that you would not select is make all images use the thumbnail image style. Um, and I like to avoid, um, you know, labeling anything on the exam as the obvious choice. Um, Oftentimes, if there's an image style involved, it is the correct answer. But in this case, they explicitly said thumbnail image style, and there's nothing said about thumbnail image style in the question. Um, it's very rare that you would make all of the images use the thumbnail image style. If they said make all images use image styles, that would be a correct choice too. Okay, you have a render array that shows a personalized message to users. What cache information should be included? So similar to the code sample we just saw. So I'll give you about a minute to do this one as well. Okay, let's see. All right, personalized message to users. Most people picked cache context of user. That is correct. Um, yes, and we talked through that a bit, so I won't spend too much time on that. Um, in the chat, I will put in, I'm going to continue teaching this now, but in the chat, I will throw in the link to the full course. If anyone's interested, feel free to submit that form with your email. The full Backend Certification Prep course begins October 1st. All right, so if anyone's interested in that, the link is in the chat. Um, all right, so you have a website that highlights different restaurants. It has a top restaurant block that displays the restaurant name, the restaurant location, and the chef's special. Restaurant is a content type with many fields. The only field that changes a lot is field chef special. What should the block's cache tags be? Let me know what you think. Answer in the QR code. I'll give you about a little less than a minute for that. All right, I'll go over this one. So let's see what people responded. Most people did pick one choice. So node, restaurant, field, chef, special. Um, but let's see what's correct. You have a website that highlights different restaurants. It has a top restaurant block that displays the restaurant name, location, and chef special. Restaurant is a content type with many fields. The only field that changes a lot is field chef special. What should the block's cache tags be? Node list restaurant. So that would make it change whenever any restaurant changes. node colon restaurant. That would make it change. Um, I don't even know if that's valid, but maybe the restaurant content type. Node ID would be if one restaurant changes, the restaurant with that specific ID. And then node restaurant field chef special. Okay. Yep. So this one is definitely B or D. Wait, sorry, B or D. This one, we went with node list restaurant. And this is one of the ones that even reading it now, it's A or D. Node restaurant field chef special. Um, I believe this is A because A is definitely a actual cache tag. It'll Sorry, no. Okay, I remember why. I got confused. I got tricked by the trick question. But now I can explain why this is right. All right, node list restaurant. Why is this right? This highlights different restaurants. It has a top restaurant block. Okay. Top restaurant block is the distraction. It's the key fact actually. The chef field is the distraction. Top restaurant block. It doesn't matter if the chef field changes. What if a new restaurant was added, right? What if a new restaurant was added and it's the top what's it called? Top restaurant of the day. A new restaurant was added to the site. That wouldn't show up if you specifically are only clearing the cache on field chef special. You have to have the ability for the cache to get cleared when new restaurants are added as well. Or if a restaurant is, you know, modified, or if different restaurant is the top one. We don't know what makes a restaurant the top one in this view. So my thinking here is node list restaurant is the only appropriate one if it's a view of multiple restaurants. If it was the same question, but it was restricted to one restaurant in the display, then maybe I'd go with D. But if it's top restaurant block, I lean towards A. So that's one where, it's difficult to say with 100% certainty, but I have had good luck with all of these exams so far. So I lean towards that way with that one at least. Um, all right, there's a widget filter that makes it possible to embed user images in CK Editor. How do you make it so that it updates the user image when a user updates their profile? Okay, go ahead and scan the QR code and let me know what you think. I realize I didn't answer one of the questions in the chat. I'll answer it after this question. All right, so let's see what people answered. If you haven't answered yet, please take your best guess. I'll do the 10-second warning. Okay. There's a widget filter that makes it possible to embed user images in the CK editor. How do you make it so it updates the user image when the user updates their profile? Okay, so you have a picture that you have the ability to embed user pictures into the CK editor, and you want to make sure that picture stays up to date. Choices. I like to look at the responses too to make sure I don't waste time on choices that nobody selected. All right, but this one we have pretty much a three-way tie. Alter the process function of the filter and add user cache context there. That is not going to be correct. It's not correct because context is exclusively saying this should look different based on who is looking at it. And that's not the scenario we're faced with. This scenario is asking about the image being outdated, right? It's not about if I'm looking at it, I should see something different than if you're looking at it. That's what a context would be for. So it's not A. B, alter the process function of the filter, add user colon the user's ID, cache tags there. So cache tag does apply. A cache tag is for proactively clearing the cache when something changes, and that is the scenario. Let's compare that to C. Add the cache tags via hook preprocess user function. Okay, not many people pick that one. That is not right. Because hook preprocess user, whoops, I accidentally exposed the answer. Hook preprocess user would be if you're loading the user profile, for example, or the whole user entity. D, cache tags should already be set. Uh, yeah, we can't assume that they're already set. Okay, so B is the right answer. Cache tags was always going to be the right answer because it's about proactive clearing. The reason B is the answer over C is because B is talking about the process function of the filter. It's talking about adding the cache tag in the filter. C, on the other hand, is talking about preprocess user, which would be potentially adding it to the user object, which may or may not actually be something that we're using in this filter. It depends on how the developer implemented the filter. They may not be actually rendering a display mode of the user, so that might not help. And then D is basically saying it already works. Which we have no reason to believe that right now. Okay, so there was one question. Oh, that was a question about B in the previous question, which said, wouldn't B recache the rest of the fields? Well, this was about cache tags. So a cache tag, even if it were the cache tag for the field chef special or the node restaurant, whatever it may be, when something changes that triggers that cache tag, essentially that cache tag would go and clear the cache for that element and all of its parents and all of the containers above it. So even the page containing that element, the block containing it. Um, I don't know if that helped at all, but I think this may be the last section, so we're likely to make it within the hour. Yeah, there's a bunch of, yeah, we'll just go through the security. Um, so it is the backend exam, but they do talk about Twig and security in Twig. Um, one of the big messages is don't translate variables directly. So don't put a variable and put the T filter. Instead, if you want to translate in a Twig file, if you want to use the T filter, for example, normally that should be because you have raw text in that file. Aside from that, the variables that are in your Twig file ideally should already be translated by the time they got there. So you shouldn't be translating variables that get passed in. Let's see. In terms of security, Twig, Drupal has a setting in Twig enabled to auto escape, which basically means if you put HTML into a Twig variable and you print it out using the Twig double curly braces, Drupal or Twig will automatically escape all of that HTML and it won't work. So you have to do it through render arrays. Alternatively, there is the raw filter. And the raw filter is more of a security risk because it won't sanitize the text before outputting it. So you should especially not use the raw filter or translating a variable if the data is coming from a user, um, like a comment or something like that. In terms of sanitizing strings in general, use the T function and Drupal translation service format plural with the @ sign or percentage placeholders for safe translatable strings. Use HTML escape for plain text. Use XSS filter for text that should allow some HTML tags, and XSS filter admin for text that comes from admins that should allow most HTML. Again, there's a lot of written material you go over in the course before you go to the class and take these quizzes. You want HTTPS on all environments. You want the private files outside of the doc root. If there's a security vulnerability, you want to update core or the module that is impacted. You want to store API keys outside of your code base. In something like secrets.settings.php, again, outside of the doc root, outside of the entire code base, actually. Um, yes. Okay. How do you escape user-generated content in Twig? We're approaching the hour mark, so I won't spend as much time on some of these. Um, so feel free to scan the QR code and take your best guess. And I'll do the 10-second countdown early. Okay. Yep, the majority got this one right. It's D. Auto escaping is enabled in Drupal, so you don't need to. How do you store a secret API key safely? Just talking about this one. So again, I won't spend too long on it. So feel free to take your best guess, and I'll do the 10-second countdown. All right, let's see. This is the first question that we got 100% right on it. Select 2 things you should do to improve security on your Drupal site. And the question will only let you answer one, so everybody will get this wrong. Thank you. This one, so I won't waste the time on that. 2 things you should do to improve security on your Drupal site. Store API inside the doc root? No. HTTPS? Yes. Private files outside? Yes. Okay. And let's see. We'll just go for one last question. What is the secure way to use the T filter to construct safe translatable strings in with variables in them? Okay. So again, I'll do 15 seconds on this one. Take your best guess and let me know. Okay. Yes, the majority got this right, but all 4 choices have some responses. So use the @ sign or the percentage placeholders. The T filter, that's how you would do it with the T filter. Okay, so just about out of time here. Again, if you're interested in learning more, um, if you're just you don't have to take the course. If you just want to take the exam, I hope this helped you prepare. If you'd like to go through the full course, again, it starts on October 1st, but I recommend signing up a few days before that so that you can review the written material before the first class. And it's just 4 classes. Each class um, is about 3 hours long. It is on Wednesdays. Each class is 2 hours and 45 minutes at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So beginning October 1st, 4 classes once a week on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Um, if you're looking to get the backend certification, it's a great way to do it, and front end is in November. But either way, I hope that you found this beneficial. If you decide to take this class without, take the exam without going through the class, I wish you the best of luck. Let me know if how it goes, um, and yeah, thank you all so much. I hope this was
Thank,
useful.
thank you, Ashraf. That was fun. You made learning fun. I always enjoy your webinars.
Thank
So
you.
thank you, everybody, for attending, and I'll see you next month.